Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Pitstick. Welcome to video number 5 for topic number 4, Internalize the Great News. We've been talking about blocks, things that happen to our life, wounds, needless fears, misinformation that keep us from internalizing, from remembering, from deeply knowing the way life is set up, and it's all great news. So we're talking now about deep grief and solutions for the grief. One of my recommendations is avoid drugs and alcohol. It's a common thought. Okay, I'll just numb myself out. I'll just mask the pain. Certainly enough people have tried it, but it doesn't work. It just delays your grief recovery. I'll share a personal story. As my junior year in high school, I had been going with the same gal for 4 years. We were pre-engaged, had our children's names picked out, thought we were going to get married and live together in this town and had everything all set up, right? Yeah. So obviously that wasn't working out. It was clear she was starting to disengage from things, and it was painful. It was rough, especially because my mom had been depressed excuse me, my whole life, and this gal was so happy and was just such a bright light in my life, my best friend as well as my girlfriend for 4 years. So it was a long weekend. I thought I was going to see her at her college, but instead I was there at the dorm all alone. Everybody else had left to go home for the weekend, and I went to one of the fellas I knew in my suite and said, "Hey, sell me $5 worth of pot, will you?" They call it a nickel bag back then. Isn't that cool? And his name was Bill, and he said, "Mark, no, not you." And I said, "What?" And he said, "I look up to you." I said, you're the most together guy in our whole dorm." And he said, "You're studying hard and you're working out and you're there to help other people and counsel other people. Don't do this. Don't fall into that." Well, shouldn't that have been a red flag for me? And when a guy that sells pot, small time, but the guy tried to talk you out by it, so I remember saying, "No, I want some." So I bought it, put it in my sock drawer, which nobody'd ever think of looking there, right? Because this is 1974. It's still pretty serious crime to have marijuana. So I pulled it out to roll a joint or whatever, however I was smoking it, and there was this voice within, just like shouting from inside me, "No, Mark, don't do this. Do anything else, but don't do this." And I'm like, "No, I'm going to have fun." I mean, let's face it, you smoke pot, you feel good, you feel happy, you laugh, music's wonderful, pizza tastes great, movies are amazing. However, that's just for a while, and then bingo, you're back to the real problems. Have to face them head on eventually. So that slowed me down, definitely. I've had an incredible life. I've helped many, many people, did a lot of things, but smoking pot, I only let myself do it once or twice a week, but I did for 7 years, from age 21 to 28. And those are such formative years, and I could give numerous examples of how that set me back. I made poor decisions. I wasn't in my clearest head. So I'm not putting myself down about it. I'm just trying to use that experience to help other people realize it's not a good solution. And later on, I had to go through the pain anyway with therapy and so on. All that was still inside me. I just covered it up temporarily. All right, you get the point. Another way to deal with deep grief, solutions, are join a grief support group, but hopefully one, or definitely one, with a positive focus. For example, for bereaved parents. I mentioned helping parents heal, very positive, very high energy. I mean, they're focused on how can you get signs from your kids? How can you perceive your kids? Your kids are in a wonderful place and they want you to be too. That sort of thing. There are other parent groups like that they just focus on pain. I mean, I've had parents from Helping Parents Heal tell me that they went to these meetings and in the group they would pass around a heavy rock to each other, and the person holding the rock would tell about their child's passing. And one mom was like deep despair, and she said, my child passed on 20 years ago, and I will never have a life, I'll never be happy. And I'm not being judgmental, I'm not criticizing, I'm not minimizing the pain. What I am pointing out is there's another way to focus on what we've been talking about here, the positives, the upsides. Another source of comfort, another solution for deep grief is remember the likelihood of soul phone technology, which will one day will allow communication with loved ones who have passed on. We don't know about pets because we haven't done any research. It's all been, except for that one angel I mentioned, it's all been with post-material people who lived on Earth before. Now they're in another time-space slice of life. But the first one will be the soul keyboard, texting and typing with them. Then soul audio, talking, then soul video like we're doing now, seeing and hearing. So there's a very high likelihood of this happening. I mean, right now as I speak, July 7th, 2024, exciting things coming together. The engineers assembling the first what we call demo soul switch, which is a component for the soul keyboard. So I know that's a lot of information. I'll talk about it in topic number 9 of this course, and you can learn more at the website soulphone.org. So those are the 4 types of wounds: abuse, judgment, disappointment, deep grief, and that again can possibly result in lower energy emotions and ways of being, like I did when my girlfriend was breaking up with me. And that can make many people feel hopeless, confused, disempowered, make poor choices, etc. So there is a better way. Here's a great analogy. This comes from, I think, Buddhist teachings, definitely from Far East. It said that each one of us, our true nature, is like a golden bowl from which golden white light emanates continuously. Okay, that's our true nature. They said, however, many of us have mud and crud in the bowl, which blocks the light from shining forth and also blocks the appearance of this beautiful golden bowl. And so people think they're just, a bunch of junk, a pile of mud and crap. When in fact, as you clear out some of that, the light shines through and you remember your true nature and you share your greatest gifts, you let your light shine, you remember your oneness with the light, the presence, all that is. So that's part of what we're talking about now. All right, 2 other categories of blocks and the solutions. The first one was wounds. These next 2 will go more quickly. And the second one is needless fears. And it turns out that when you understand the big picture of life, all fears are needless. Some of the common causes of needless fears are the limited brain and sense organs. We've talked about this. They misreport the nature of reality, what is really real. Again, the brain and sense organs, especially the eyes, ears, touch, only detect much less than 1% of reality. And so this explains, for example, the appearance of the finality of death. If you believe what your brain perceives and tells you, you think, yeah, that could be the end. And so again, that's a cause of needless fears. Another is fear-based and erroneous religious teachings. We've talked about that people trust for accurate information about the way life is set up. Another, misinformed beliefs. For example, just 500 years ago, many people believed that the earth was flat and you could fall off. I've seen pictures of sailors in a boat, and they're looking out, toward the horizon, saying, "Are we getting close to the edge? We don't want to fall off." God, talk about a fear. Well, similarly, many people in 2024 still suffer from needless fears that are equally silly, unbased, ignorant, misinformed. Things like fear of death, fear about not seeing loved ones who passed on again, fear of hell, fear of a distant or angry God. None of these align with our contemporary understandings and the best archaic understandings about how life is set up. So all this fear, thanks to religious institutions trusted to inform people about the afterlife, Creator, and how to best live on earth. Continuing causes of needless fears. People don't often talk about their personal experiences and what's really important in life. We mentioned first-hand experiences like seeing, hearing, feeling loved ones who have changed worlds during these afterlife contacts, having near-death experiences. Some people don't share them. And other personal experiences, some, perhaps many people, what's called major and minors. Average American watches 6 to 7 hours of TV a day, so they could tell you, who the biggest Hollywood star just married or broke up with. But to talk about what's really important, and literally, some people never even think about these topics, or at least much, until they're on their deathbed, and then it's kind of late to get satisfying answers sometimes. So anyway, thus the importance of talking about this, sharing it, and that gives others permission to do the same. Another cause of needless fears is that war profiteers and so-called leaders demonize others. They make us afraid of people in other countries when in fact we're all about the same, good, loving people. I've talked with or read accounts of numerous people who have traveled around the world and say just that. Hey, 98% of the people out there are good, loving, peaceful. They just want to live their lives. It's just a few percentage of really bad eggs that make the news. And again, our leaders profit, quote leaders, profit by scaring us about, for example, in the U.S., Russians. And guess who makes money? Big corporations that benefit from wars, that sell arms, while young men usually, and some women, suffer and die. Again, it's just crazy, and we don't have to live like that. We can change things. For example, the U.S. having 800 military bases around the world. Is that really important to protect our country? Is that really necessary? So my grandpa Marsh, when I was a kid, was fond of saying this quote, and he's exactly right: "War is a game that, were their subjects wise, kings could not play." So, John Lennon and others had it right. War is over if you want it, and focusing on peace. yeah, we're going to defend our country, of course, and we need to defend our borders. But, this trying to control the whole world, it's impossible. I mean, shouldn't we have learned that by now? We've been in wars pretty much since my whole life, Korean War, Vietnam, etc. And while at home, people are suffering for lack of basics when all this money is spent on bombs and bullets. So no wonder, and there's other causes, so no wonder needless fears and worries are so common. So some solutions for them: first of all, take comfort from and inspiration in religious and spiritual wisdom sources that make sense to you. What was termed the perennial philosophy by Aldous Huxley and others, those golden threads of truth that run among the world's great religions. So here's a few beautiful examples. William Blake said, "If the doors of perception were cleared, everything would appear to humans as it really is, infinite." Wow, that's a really powerful thought, and one you might want to write down and post where you'll see it often. And the word infinite entails two things: immortal, never-ending, deathless, timeless, but also expanding, ever expanding, changing, growing. So again, that quote, "If the doors of perception were cleared, everything would appear as it really is to humans, infinite." And the doors of perception, of course, being our senses, our perceptions. Norman Vincent Peale said, "Fear knocked on my door. Faith answered, no one was there." Another really powerful statement. Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And that's what we're talking about here. There's many beautiful stories from Hinduism, Buddhism, other religions. For example, one great teacher, Kabir, Kabir, had an ashram, had students, was teaching spiritual truths, the nature of reality, and his son passed on. And some of the other students saw Kabir in the garden weeping. And later they said, "Master, we don't understand. You teach us that death is an illusion, and yet here you are crying over your son." And he said, "Yes, death is an illusion, and the death of a child is the cruelest of all illusions." So that points out the importance of, you have your humanness, your heart breaks when someone passes, or other wounds, but at the same time, you remember the big picture of life, and that's the best way I know to get through this earthly experience in a stellar way. Another solution for needless fears is trust your inner wisdom. Again, this has been described as seeing with eyes that really see, hearing with eyes that hear, and also using some of the general solutions: prayer, meditation, time in nature. So powerful. Another solution, post the acronym, where you'll see this often: fear equals false evidence appearing real, FEAR. Next, remember what you're learning about the great news and the big picture of life. The more you know that, the more you're relatively immune from fear. You realize that all fears are really needless, baseless, when you understand how life is set up. Things like you're an indestructible being of energy, consciousness, life force, and so is everyone else. That 100-year-long earthly experience is like a blink of an eye in the span of eternity. That only part of your energy, the totality of who you are, manifested quite likely in this earthly experience. That you're one with the one and part of source. You're inextricably interconnected with all that is, all people and nature. So again, these are really important things to remember and solutions for needless fears. And now the third category of factors that can cause blocks to internalizing the great news. We talked about wounds, we talked about needless fears. Now, religious, educational, and cultural misinformation. As a youth, I and everyone I knew trusted that politicians, ministers, teachers, businesses, and doctors knew best. We kept them on a pedestal. That trust has been, in some cases, horribly misused, resulting in record low levels of trust now. For example, in 1960, 90% of Americans trusted the government. Now that number is 16%. Now only 19% of Americans regularly attend church services versus 3 or 4 times that 50 years ago. So we've learned the hard way that big businesses will often turn a blind eye to integrity, decency, morals, ethics, when large potential profits exist. The government, big corporation, military-industrial complex, big pharma, hospital complexes, big agri, and some churches. And many people have suffered and died from all this, and that's what I don't really get, because, for example, corporation executives who are polluting our air, food, and water, they and their loved ones are suffering and dying too. But I guess that just doesn't register. They're so focused on big money and getting rich. So many people have suffered and died because of this. The good news is that suffering, enough people get to the point where they say, that's it, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore. And resultant lack of trust, blind trust, thinking for themselves, questioning authority, can lead to searching for what's really real, optimal solutions, and stopping this abuse of humanity. First, the Bible has been definitely and significantly changed. I learned that in theology school and in years since. And this isn't just a criticism of Christianity, because other religious texts get changed too. I mean, over time, especially if they're thousands of years old. So that's why it's important to read between the lines, to discern using your inner wisdom, to look for commonality, what teachings align with other things. For example, Aramaic description about what happens after you pass on described that you go through a tunnel and you experience the good and the bad you did. A couple thousand years later, many near-death experiencers and clinical research on that talk about the life review that they experienced while clinically dead. Well, that's validation of ancient teachings, and that's what's important to look for, and I share. For example, talk about change. It's one of the things that puzzled me when I was a youth was, the statement, thou shalt fear the Lord thy God. I remember thinking, what? I don't fear my own parents. Why would I fear who's supposed to be the cosmic parent? And when I got to theology school, I found that the word Greek, German, that language bridge that was behind fear could have just as easily been translated as respect. So respect your creator, sure, but fear, no. And that's such a subtle difference, but one that makes the difference between people living in fear versus openness and hope and inspiration. There are lots of schizoid, blasphemous, ridiculous, idiotic teachings, especially in the Old Testament, that are believed by some people to be literal. So if you take it as a story, what were the authors trying to portray, then you can see sense in it. But if you take it as a literal description of history and that and the implications of that, then it creates a lot of problems. For example, in chapter 1 of Genesis, quote, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. All right? But just 6 chapters later, the same God was flooding his creation, what he set up, because people refused to acknowledge him, and especially because some of the sons of God were having sex with female giants. Like, what is going on here? Yeah, if you believe Adam and Eve, the story, which I don't, it's a story, I don't take it literally, then who are these sons of God and who are these giants? So again, it's just a mess, and people that try to take it literally, it just twists the mind, and then that can twist how they treat and see others. Here's another one of my least favorites. To test his faith, God told Abraham to kill his son Isaac. And Abraham had him bound and ready to kill him according to the story. Then God said, okay, you don't have to, no, I just wanted to see if you were faithful. This isn't the real God, okay? This isn't the creator and sustainer of all life. This is a belief in a local, provincial God, quote, God with a small g. Joseph Campbell made this point. He's talked about what an important transition it is to discard these local gods with a small g and understand the source of all life, the true nature of creator, source energy. Genesis 19:20, more craziness about Sodom and Gomorrah, which some fundamentalists take as license to condemn gays and mistreat them and believe they're going to go to hell forever and aren't really people. So basically, if you've forgotten this story, several male angels visited Lot. Men of the village got word and wanted to have sex with them. What? Lot said, no, take my virgin daughters instead, but leave the angels behind. The crowd still wanted them. So God stepped in and said, Lot, get your family out of there. I'm going to level this area, but be careful not to look back. So they're running out while Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed by God. But Ruth, Lot's wife, looked back and, what do you know? She's turned to a pillar of salt. She didn't listen. And so again, for people to take that seriously and base their belief about sexual orientation and how they treat people, this is the Old Testament, thousands of years ago. It's just so ignorant and needless. And causes of blocks, whether you're the gay person receiving the mistreatment or you're the fundamentalist thinking it's okay to condemn a whole group of people. It causes blocks that prevent you from internalizing the great news. One of the biggest that many people trip up on or have trouble believing, understandably, is on one hand you have a loving God, all-knowing, loving, powerful, and yet 90% or so of people are going to go to hell forever because they don't believe a certain way or act a certain way. Huh? So if you had trouble with that one, join the crowd. There are lots of people who are sharing this. Only one way to salvation. I had this, so I'll step on some toes here, but some fundamentalists. Well, first of all, let me back up. You realize there are over 10,000 different denominations and cults just within Christianity. So some of the more conservative fundamentalists believe there's only one way to salvation, to accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. But lots of many more, the majority of Christians view Jesus as the greatest way shower, the ultimate expression of a person who realized how life was set up and was teaching about it, and likely knew, good chance he would suffer and be killed, but was willing to do it like a bodhisattva out of love to try to awaken people. So in that sense, Jesus and other great teachers saved people from spiritual ignorance. Now compare that message with one of God required that his only son would suffer and die, and then God would change his mind about killing humanity, who was evil from birth because Adam and Eve sinned. Just like, when does it stop? So hopefully this will help you shuck off the ignorance and look for the points in these stories and internalize the great news. And I could just go on, in this same spirit of what I've been sharing. In the time of the Crusades, church leaders felt justified killing those who were different. People of other religions, Muslims, for example, but even people from different denominations or within their own denomination, but who varied some. For example, the Cathars, who are considered heretical Catholics by mainstream Catholicism because they believed in reincarnation. And the Crusaders were sent out to kill the Cathars, and a representative, Pope Innocent III, well, there's a good name for him, was asked, well, how will we know which ones to kill? Because they all look alike. Some of them are real Catholics, some of them are heretical Catholics. The representative said, kill them all, for the Lord knows his own. This is the history of this organization that's supposed to, teach us about life and afterlife and so on. So, time for some change. There's, to this day, reliance on ancient doctrines, even among more mainstream Protestant denominations. Around 2000, when I was researching my book, Soul Proof, I called different ones, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Methodist, and so on, and said, well, what are your church's beliefs about hell, the nature of hell? And they said, well, our canons from the 1500s or 1600s or whenever state this. And I say, yeah, I know, but what does your church believe now? And in several cases, there was a pause, and they said, well, we still follow and adhere to the church canons. I'm like, what else do we trust and believe and consider the final word from the 1600s? I mean, that was around the Dark Ages, 1500s. Oftentimes, people of one religion are not open to and respectful of those of other religions, and it's a shame, because you might have heard the analogy of the blind men and the elephant. 5 blind men come along and they're each touching different parts of the elephant. Oh, this animal's like a rope, feeling the tail. No, it's like a big leaf, feeling the ear. It's like a wall, feeling the side. Well, when we all share our different understandings, we get a bigger picture of what is really real. And then finally, let's not forget to mention control and perversion by, quote, pastors, especially celibate ones, who sexually abuse so many young people over the years. So, again, if you think I'm being too harsh about or focused on religion, just realize the suffering and alienation that's been caused by erroneous teachings that so many people trust. I mean, I know this firsthand, and so do other caregivers. So to be clear, and in this about the religious misinformation, I consider myself a Christian, but more on the liberal end. Jesus as the greatest reflection of God, the ultimate way shower and teacher on earth. So you can see article number 83 at soulproof.com. Am I a Christian? And as I discuss in there, I was brought up a Christian, but I've also learned a lot from Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, and Native American spirituality sources. So that's enough for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. We'll talk about solutions for religious misinformation. Let it shine.